Greetings, YouTube. As anyone who's been following American politics knows, Congress has been invaded by conservatives. And one of the things that they've been saying they're going to do immediately upon taking over is they're going to repeal the health care reform. Or at least they're going to try. They're going to fail. But the Congressional Budget Office, the people that, keep track of our economy and how much things cost and how we spend things, this is a nonpartisan organization that works for Congress. They've stated this week that if the health care reform were repealed, it would cost the American people $230 billion and force 30 million Americans off of health care coverage, driving up the number of Americans that weren't covered to over 50 million people. So you can see where the loyalties of the conservatives actually lie. It isn't with the American people. It isn't with our nation. It's with the corporations. It's with their corporate masters. Because that's where their loyalties lie. Less than 1% of Americans are millionaires. Half of Congress are millionaires. So where do you think their loyalties lie? Do they lie with the rest of us, the 99% that aren't millionaires? Or do they lie with their fellow millionaires? Now, $230 billion is disgusting. I mean, the fact that they'd be willing to squander that type of money in the condition our current economy is just absurd. But the fact that they're willing to sit back and let 50 million Americans have no health care coverage. Health care coverage, by the way, that the Congress all gets for free off of tax dollars. Kind of sounds like a single-payer universal health care system to me. But they're willing to let 50 million Americans just swing in the breeze. And if they get sick, and if they die, they die. Because, you see, none of those 50 million people are ever going to be members of that 2% rich segment. They're never going to be the conservative corporate masters that control the conservative politicians. Those people, they're all set. They're never going to have to worry about health care. Those 50 million people that wouldn't have it, they're small potatoes, folks. They're the little people. And conservative politicians don't care about the little people. Now, if you ask the average American if they were a liberal, they're going to say no. Because over the past 4 decades, conservatives have turned the word liberal into a curse. I am one of the rare exceptions who is willing to step forward and say, yes, I am a liberal progressive. I am just one step shy of a full-blown socialist. But if you look at how Americans think and what policies they support, they're liberal progressives. We have asked the American people, polls have been done, and they said, what do you think is the best way to fix the economy? 60% of them said, tax the wealthy. 20% of them said, cut military spending. Those aren't things that are going to be really supported all that easily in Congress. Particularly seeing as, half of them would be adversely affected by having their taxes raised. And remember, folks, when they raise the taxes to those who make more than $250,000, they only tax the money above $250,000. So that only starts at $250,000 and one. And then that $1 gets taxed at the higher rate. All the other money under that gets taxed at the regular rate. So if you go from $250,000 to $250,000 and $1, you suddenly don't get nailed by the IRS. Only the money taxed over that spot. Remember that. We're not driving middle Americans into the poorhouse with these tax raises. We're just getting the people who have huge amounts of money and really should be paying more to the American people. Now, if you ask the American people, do you think that we should cut Medicare? 4% say yes. And if you ask them, do you think that we should cut Social Security? 3% support that. But those are policies that they're really looking at cutting. Why? Because the corporate masters aren't ever going to use Medicare or Social Security. So what do they care if they get slashed? They could care less if they disappeared. It's not going to affect them anyway. You see this? What's going on here? This isn't about fiscal conservatives. This isn't about the economy. This is about class warfare. The rich have declared war on the middle class and the poor, on the 98% of us that aren't wealthy. And they're using conservative politicians to wage that war. For example, health care. If you ask the American people, do you support government-run health care? They say no. But if you ask the American people, do you support a public option? 70% of them say yes. Newsflash, folks. That's a government policy. That's government-run health care. And I'm thrilled by that concept. Of course I want the government to run health care. I elect the people to government. I have some control over the people in government. I have no control over the people in a private corporation. If my corporation called me up tomorrow and said, hey, you're not covered anymore, I'm screwed. I have no option. I can't afford my health care coverage without my company. There's no way I can afford it on my own. I would have to forge ahead into the wilderness without any health care coverage of any kind. And I'm a diabetic on maintenance meds. That would be bad. Private corporation doesn't care. If I become too much of a pain to them, I'm gone. Government-run health care, at least I have some recourse. I would have someone I could complain to. But not a private corporation. I'm just a check mark on a piece of paper. So the American people may not call themselves liberals. They may, in fact, curse that word along with the conservatives. But they support liberal policies. The American people are an open-minded, open-hearted, liberal nation. I just wish the conservative politicians would listen to them.